My name's Samantha Connor. I'm a disability advocate and I've flown from Western Australia. Jax has flown from Victoria. Kelly has flown from New South Wales, and the reason we've done that is because of the importance of this issue. Not only because of the importance of the issue in South Australia, where there is very little voices of disabled people and representation, but also because it opens the door for this to happen in other states of Australia. So we don't have loud voices, we don't have unlimited funds, we don't have glossy campaigns, we don't have articulate public figures like Andrew Denton, and that's why you need to listen harder, because we're the people who are going to die as a result of this legislation. And there are 4 of us here, 4 of us, who have degenerative disabilities. Under the legislation, it says that we talk about medical conditions, not disability, as one of the amendments that has been rushed through. Doesn't matter, because all disabilities arise as the result of a medical condition, and therefore we are all in. Disability is in from the onset. 4 of us sitting at the table are people who you're talking about when you're talking about this legislation. Laws are passed in Australia to keep people safe, but we and other vulnerable groups will not be safe if the Voluntary Euthanasia Act is approved. We could argue under the proposed legislation that our suffering was so unbearable that we have to end our lives. And for Glenda's talking about our suffering sometimes being unbearable, and it's usually not from, being a disabled person. People's lives can be intolerable. People's lives can involve suffering, and that suffering is real. But it's because of ableism and discrimination, and also hate and fear. People fear disability. People don't mourn our loss. People talk about mercy killings when we're murdered. If people heard our stories, these are the stories we'd tell them. We'd say that people in this state are only able to access 2 showers a week. We'd say that the DSP is being slashed all over Australia. It's being reviewed at the moment, and people are already, half of all disabled people are living below the poverty line. We'd tell them that people are living in crisis. We talk about the types of human-imposed and systemic barriers caused by discrimination. We're far less likely to be able to access medical, psychological or dental services, and as a consequence of those other lacks of accessible services, often experience chronic pain. We're devalued. I work in the area of violence, abuse and neglect against people with disability. And the repeated murders of disabled people are not nearly as chilling as the fact that their parents walk free over and over, and they're described as devoted. This is a very real thing. I don't know if you guys have heard today that there's been an announcement that a family has tragically died with 2 autistic children, and we don't know what's happened with that tragedy, but the comments on social media are appalling. Autistic people are being traumatised by the response, which is not about the death of a family. In South Australia, 29-year-old Kyla Puhl was starved to death at home by her parents, and no charges were laid against her family, who admitted withholding food and hydration until she died. In the UK, they collect statistics around hate crime. We don't do that here. In the last 2 years, the UK statistics have risen by 110%, and people don't understand that we're often murdered because we're hated and feared. Everybody knows about Snowtown. It's so famous, there was a movie made. 5 of the 11 victims were disabled people, and nobody ever talks about that in the context of hate crime. Those people were murdered because of their vulnerability and the perception of their weakness. The medical safeguards that people promote are often the causes of our deaths. We're switched off in hospitals every day, and we wake up with DNR bands around our wrists, which we haven't authorised. Our friend Stella Young wrote about this before she died. She'd gone in for routine surgery, and just before going under anaesthetic, a nurse asked how old she was, and Stella had OI. She said she was 32. And the nurse said, "Oh, you're doing well, aren't you?" And the implications that a 32-year-old would be told, that 32 is a good innings, is just appalling. And that's how the medical model... Osteogenesis imperfecta.
Chalky bones.
The chorus of people who know the medical terminology. So, your bones break when you... Yeah.
I'm going to go.
So, okay.
Come on, Molly. Yeah.
So there's issues around This is death by discrimination. You're condemning a population of people to death on the basis of your membership of a minority group. And all of these amendments that have been put in at the last minute, it doesn't matter how many hastily worded woolly clauses are put into the bill at the last minute. This is really flawed legislation that you could drive a truck through. My mother died 2 years ago. We've had 12 people die in the last 2 generations because of a gene called the BRCA gene. And I was initially a person who was conflicted about cancer and about euthanasia. But as somebody who's a human rights activist watching what happens to my people every day, I can't support euthanasia legislation. This year we carried out a social experiment. I had a large tin that said, "Send me to a Swiss suicide clinic." And I went around and rattled it. It was a group of We Disabled people. Rattled it for an hour. Not one person refused to donate. Not one person said, "Are you okay?" Not one person said, "Can we help?" Some people also told me that they would also want to die if they were disabled. I'm a manual wheelchair user and I'm kind of just sitting down. So, and we raised $200 and donated it to a suicide bereavement service. But it was a really eye-opening thing to me about the perception that people had of me. It wasn't just about that I might be a charity case. It was that, people think that we're better off dead. So I think disabled people internationally have offered their support. There's a very strong video by Liz Carr from Not Dead Yet, which I'd really encourage you guys to watch if you can. And they've sent messages to plead with South Australian legislators not to end our lives. And they've sent a message which is, Not Dead Yet International believe that if bills like this are passed, that some people's lives will be ended without their consent through mistakes and abuse and pressure. No safeguards have ever been enacted or proposed that can prevent this outcome, an outcome which cannot be undone. And I think that's a really important message when you look at the overseas cases of disabled people who have died as a result of legislation that's been acted and the broadening of that legislation. The stories that we hear are all about disabled people. So we're asking you to protect our lives by assisting us to live and not to die, to think of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, which Article 10 states that not only do we have an inherent right to life, but we also have the right to live with the same enjoyment as other people and to be supported to live. And so thank you.